I'd like to welcome everybody to today's NASIG's Continuing Education Committee's webinar series on finding jobs, getting jobs, doing jobs, making the leap from library student to professional librarian. Before we begin today, I just want to mention that this committee through NASIG puts on many webinars like this. If you're a student, we'd like to encourage you to join NASIG. It's a great way to get some service, to actually network, and to actually learn a lot more about different professional positions in the field of librarianship. I want to also acknowledge and thank all the different MLIS library program directors for making sure that the advertising was put out for this. This webinar has been specifically targeted at those people in MLIS programs or recent graduates from such programs. So you're among like-minded people in this. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our presenter today, Miss Meggan Press. She's a teaching and learning engagement librarian at Indiana University at the Herman B. Wells Library. She is the author of Get the Job, Academic Library Hiring for the New Librarian. It was published in 2020 by ACRL. Without further ado, here's Meggan, and we look forward to this wonderful presentation.
Thank you so much to the Continuing Education Committee for inviting me to talk to you all. I'm really excited to hear what concerns and questions you might have. I have some information to offer. So if you can feel free to use the chat to put any questions in that you like at any time. I'm going to hold off answering those questions until I get to the end of what I have to share today, just so that we can save time in answering questions that maybe aren't answered by what I have to share. So good afternoon. As I was introduced, I'm Meggan Press. I'm the Associate Librarian for Teaching and Learning at Indiana University Bloomington, and the author of this here book titled Get the Job, Academic Library Hiring for the New Librarian. The book, I wrote the book because the academic job search is a very specific process, and it does not resemble anything that most of us have had any cause to experience before. Unless you grew up with existing relationships in academia, your social network is not a whole lot of help. And in fact, if your experience is anything like mine, your family and friends will think it's completely bonkers what you have to do to get a library job. And actually, it is a little bit bonkers when you sit down and think about it. But you have no reason to know how to do this before you start doing it. And I think that lack of prior knowledge often gets lost in some of these questions about what a successful hiring process or successful job searching looks for. I also know that supportive mentors have a tremendous impact on your success and on your perceived success, what you think of how things went. And they can help you find the path and they can help you stay on it. But not everyone is lucky enough to have an awesome mentor in the process. And even if you do have an awesome mentor in the process, the information communicated in that relationship is really informal. It's limited in impact due to the close nature of the relationship. And so I wrote this book in order to broaden access to the critical information that will make a difference in your experience of the process and also your success in the process. Try to be the on-paper mentor that you may not have in person. So the book is intended for folks who are new to the academic job search, although the information can be helpful regardless of your experience in the academic job search, and honestly, regardless of whether you're looking for an academic job. A lot of the information there is useful to folks who might be looking for public library jobs or that kind of thing too. There's far more information in this book than I can cover in 40 minutes. So what I am going to talk to you about today is I would consider added value to the book and not a repeat of the information that's in there. If you're interested, and I hope you are, you can check your library for a copy. Both hard copies and e-copies are available. Or if you'd really like to throw me a solid coffee, you can go buy one of these from the ALA store. And there's a link here in the presentation. So quick roadmap of what I'm going to talk about here today. First, we're going to all get on the same page in terms of like what the hiring timeline looks like for an academic job. And then we're going to talk in turn about job postings, about application materials, the first round interview, the second round interview, and then there'll be time at the end for questions. So this is about us kind of getting all on the same page about how to get hired. In case no one has laid it out for you like this before, these are approximate time between steps of finding and getting hired in a job. So the first step is to find the job posting. There's a number of free places to do this, one of which is the ALA job list, ALJ, I need a library job.com, Hire at Jobs, listservs, professional memberships like NASIG are good places to find this kind of stuff within your network. And then usually that job posting is only up for a short period of time. So maybe 2 weeks from when you find that job posting, you want to have your application sent in. And when you do that, you want to follow all instructions about the materials to include, and you don't need to send anything extra. When I have an applicant that's asked for a CV, a cover letter, and a list of recommendations, and then they also send me a teaching statement and a diversity statement and all this other stuff, I can't actually look at that because I'm trying to compare the materials I requested against other people's materials. You sending more doesn't help your case. Then, if you're lucky, you get a first round interview, and that typically takes place on these days online via Zoom. As was noted, my book was published in 2020, July 2020, which is not a great timeline for publishing a book. I don't know that I'd recommend it, but that's just the way it worked out. And so you'll find some things that are different now than were at the time that I published the book. At the time I published the book, phone interviews were still fairly common. Now we mostly do them by Zoom. And they'll be approximately 10 to 45 minutes long with the search committee. That happens about 6 weeks to 3 months after you apply for the job. And then another 6 weeks to 3 months, maybe after that, if you're lucky, you get to the second round interview where it typically takes place on campus and in person, and it usually usually there's travel involved. And then again, if you're really lucky, you get to the gainful employment stage, which probably, once again, 6 weeks to 3 months after that, you may consider yourself gainfully employed. And if you add all that up, we're looking at about 4 to 9 months total, give or take, not including the time that it takes to relocate. So this is a really long-term process. And that's kind of stinky because I know you want to get out of your degree and you want to go into a job because those student loans aren't going to wait for no man. But I think it's more important that you have an idea of how long this might take so that it can inform you a little bit on when you want to start looking for jobs. So here are some of my top tips for just like the general process, the general hiring process. First of all, plan for that long process. The best time to begin applying in order to get hired. So if I'm assuming that I'm graduating in May, as many of us do, not all of us, but I guess we'd call that the standard timeline. I want to start applying for jobs in October or November. The second best time to start applying for jobs is right now, as soon as you can. It's going to take, best case scenario, 3 to 4 months before you are hired, relocated, and started. Secondly, geographic flexibility equals faster hiring. I'll tell you a little anecdote. So academic hiring usually requires relocation. It's pretty uncommon that you end up exactly where you want to be outside of grad school. Not that it never happens, but it's uncommon. Right now, I have been working with multiple grad students who really want to be in the Chicago area because that is where they are from at the completion of their degree. They have been not as successful as you might hope in securing even a phone interview, a first round interview, because they have limited themselves geographically. The second they expanded their view beyond Chicago area, which Chicago has lots of great institutions of higher education, it's also a very attractive place to be. They got jobs and interviews almost instantly and jobs really quickly after that. So when you're leaving grad school, you may have the long-term desire to be in a geographic area, but it may take you a few years of solid professional experience before you can make your way back to that area. And at a certain point, you just have to get a job. So keep in mind that if you can be flexible, and we can't all be, but if you can, you will be more successful and get hired faster. So secondly, or this, I guess this is third, be choosy, but not precious. By which I mean, have an idea of the scope and range of what you're looking for, both in the job description and the geographic location, but don't apply for everything. Don't hold out for that perfect job either, because if you're being too precious, that increases the pressure on that one job, and not being choosy enough makes the scope really hard to manage. It takes a lot of time to tailor your materials when you're applying to these jobs. And so if you're applying to everything, the temptation is to do less tailoring, which, believe me, the search committee can see instantly. It's not in your best interest to send the same application package everywhere. And it's also not in your best interest to send very minimally tailored information everywhere. Go all in on the places you want to apply to. And don't be too choosy, but don't be too precious either. Yeah. Practice makes improvement and comfort. So there's a lot of things that you can do in this process to get comfortable with the discomfort of this process. Those things include, interviewing is uncomfortable even when you're doing it right. Practicing is going to help you become friends with that feeling of discomfort. So apply to likely jobs before that perfect one comes along. Practice your presentations by yourself, in front of people, record yourself, whatever helps you to feel that little bit of extra adrenaline, right? You can ask generative AI to interview you for a job. Good use of generative AI, I would say, for this. And the intent in this practice isn't to become sort of more perfect at some idealistic, ideal, but in a strange environment, it's to force glitches before you get to that environment and learn how to address the glitches or recover from those things that you might want to be like, oh, whoops, let me back up and try that again. And to do that in a low stakes environment before you get in front of a search committee. Keep organized minimally. It's important to make and keep a copy of the job posting, because these tend to disappear after a few weeks. So when they take down the job posting, that may or may not be, that's probably weeks before you're called up for that second round interview, when you may want to reference that job posting again. So minimally, keep a copy of all of the job postings that you're applying to so that you have that material to reference when you get to the interview steps. Don't do it alone if at all possible. If you have friends or others in your cohort that you can sort of invite to an application party where you all sit down and work on application materials together, where you can read your materials, where you can ask for feedback, it's really helpful if you can sort of find that kind of supportive community or create that sort of supportive community for yourself. And then lastly, if you're a fan of Ted Lasso, as I am, you will be familiar with the phrase, be a goldfish, okay? What is the happiest animal on the planet? It's a goldfish, because their memories last less than 5 seconds or something like that. Apply and move on. Once you've submitted your applications, you have no control over what happens next, including how long it takes for someone to notify you whether you're going to get that phone interview or not get the phone interview. Dwelling on it will get you nowhere. So you will be happier in the process if you can always be looking to the next thing in front of you rather than, biting down your fingernails, waiting for that email to come through. So moving on to the job posting. From here in this presentation, I settled on a format where I sort of define what it is we're talking about, and then I give you an idea of what that looks like from the applicant's perspective and what that looks like from the search committee or institution's perspective. I think it's helpful to take a little bit of a higher level view of these things. There's a lot happening to you in the process, but the search committee also has like things that they are thinking about maybe a little bit differently than you. And I'm going to try and give you some of those things. So the job posting, what is it? It is an invitation to apply to an open position. The base job description document is what is used to generate a hiring grid. What is a hiring grid? So it's a rubric used in most hiring processes that so that you can compare candidates fairly to each other and to the job description. It's used for fairness purposes, also used for liability purposes. So we cannot, if the job says required qualifications, usually job descriptions will say required qualifications and preferred qualifications. The required qualifications, you have to have those in order to move on. You don't have to have them in libraries, right? Not all of your experience needs to happen in the libraries, but you have to have an ALA accredited degree and, certain things in order to be considered for this job. If you don't meet those qualifications, those required qualifications, usually institutions are trying to keep those as minimal as possible in order to open the pool to as many people as possible. But if you don't meet the required qualifications, you will not go forward in the process unless everybody doesn't meet the required qualifications. So from your end, you look at a job posting, immediately it's like, yes, opportunity, this looks great. I am so desperate for a job. There's this list of requirements that you may or may not have all of. It kind of feels like this crazy hoops to jump on your way to like paying your bills, which is like what you're actually concerned about. Meanwhile, from my end of things, and in this instance, I'm making myself the search committee, this looks like opportunity and desperation for us too. Opportunity to have a wonderful new colleague that we're really excited to work with, and desperation because also there is this job that needs doing by someone else, and right now it's being done by someone whose job it isn't, in a way that like no one's necessarily happy with the quality that we're able to produce when it's not somebody's full-time job. It may very well, in fact, be me that is doing the majority of that job, and I'm really looking forward to having an awesome new colleague that I can not only pay, but also feel some relief in what is expected of me. So here are some top tips for your for reading the job ad. First of all, when you're looking at a job ad, what are the top 2 or 3 things that you think this person spends their time doing? There's a lot of things listed there, but there's really 2, maximum 3 things that person spends the majority of their time doing. Once you define those things, you know where it's most important to spend your time in the cover letter, describing how you have experience that will help you do those things. I always recommend highlighting keywords in that job ad description and using them in your materials. So if you highlight keywords and then use them in your materials, I know that you are understanding what I'm asking for, that you have that we're sort of like matching, we're understanding each other. It's also way harder to, the less tailored materials are, the less of those matching keywords they're going to have, right? Because a generic cover letter is simply generic and it doesn't necessarily speak to the needs of that particular institution. As I said before, those required qualifications, which most places these days are really trying to keep super minimal. What are like the minimal bar that needs to be jumped in order for a person to be qualified to do this job? Those are really required. The rest, the preferred qualifications, that's simply differentiation between different skill sets that people have. Student work counts if you have recently completed a degree in the area. So if you've been working at the reference desk for the last 6 months, you have experience working at a reference desk. And if you did it as a student, that's good enough for me. I want to know that you have, that you know what it's like to work at a reference desk, right? Or whatever else it is. And then secondly, I think it's important when you're looking at the job ad to understand that there is a difference in expectations between a staff librarian job and a tenure track faculty librarian job. And those will usually become obvious in the job posting because the job postings for tenure track faculty will reference things like research, like professional development, like service, like you might get questions in the interview about what your research interests are. And we can talk more specifically about how to answer those questions later. I find that the research question interest is one that students often trip over when they're new to applying for jobs. But knowing whether the job that you're applying for is a staff level job or a tenure track faculty job is going to help you to know whether that job is what you're looking for is going to be a good fit for you, and it's going to help you to know what to talk about in your application materials. One thing to keep in mind is that I find students psych themselves out on job postings because they think that they're applying to a pool that includes the people who do this the best out of everyone in the whole entire world, right? That's not the case. There are plenty of people who are really good at their jobs who are not actively looking for another job right now and aren't applying. You aren't in competition with the highest achiever ever in that position. You are in competition with the people who happen to apply to that job, who happen to be in that applicant pool. It's not everybody. Sometimes it's just luck of the draw who ends up in the pool with you. So let's talk a little bit about the application package. So what is it? The application package is these materials that are submitted in order to show that you have the qualifications and interests in an open position. Usually it consists of a CV and cover letter. Often it will include a request for references. Less often, but not unheard of, includes things like a diversity statement, a teaching philosophy statement, and or a writing sample. So from your end, this is an opportunity to contextualize your experiences that demonstrate that you are qualified for this job. This is an opportunity to convince the committee that they want to talk with you further, right? Your application package doesn't get you the job. Your application package gets you another conversation with the people. So from my end, when I'm looking at an application package, I'm looking, did they follow directions? Did they submit more materials than I asked for? Did they submit all the materials that I asked for? I will usually look at a CV first. CV stands for curriculum vitae. It is similar to a resume, except that it tends to be far more extensive. Does their CV indicate that they could theoretically have the skills needed to do this job? Does the cover letter demonstrate that they have an understanding of the job and that they highlight experiences that illustrate their ability to do the job? Do I want to talk with them more? These are the things I'm thinking when I'm reading application materials. My book has a really useful method for analyzing job postings and translating them to a cover letter. It helps you to be really strategic about where to place your various experiences, what's most useful to be talked about in a CV versus a cover letter. That's more than I'm able to cover in the time that I have here today. But if you only take that part away from the things that I have put in the book, I think you will feel a lot more confident in the process. So My top tips for the application package, I've said it before, but it bears saying again, tailor your materials to the job. Use those highlighted keywords to show the committee that you know what you're talking about and that you are talking about the same thing as them. Make your CV easy to scan or read with clear labels and formatting. I can't stress enough that the scannability of your CV is really helpful to a committee. Is it the thing that's going to get you the job? No, it's not the thing that's going to get you the job. Are you going to make it easier for the committee to say, yes, I'd like to talk to this person further? Yes, that's what will happen. Again, send only the materials requested. When I'm thinking about the difference between a CV and a cover letter, to me, the CV is black and white. Black and white, do you have the degree? Do you have the job experience? Do you have the service or nascent publications or whatever it is that show me that you can do the job? Hypothetically, I think that you probably have the skills to do this job. The cover letter adds color and nuance to those things. There is no need to replicate information in the CV and the cover letter. We have both of those materials. We look at both of those materials. So you can say something like in your cover letter, like at the position I held XYZ working with electronic resources. I did these things that really relate to this, the position that you're asking for. I don't need you to say, I held that job. Like, yes, I can tell from your cover letter that you held the job. What color, what nuance, what anecdotes, what examples can you share about your work in that job that make me feel like you know what the job is and are capable of doing it? Then again, prioritize addressing the top 2 to 3 things that a person in this position will spend most of their time doing. There's going to be a lot of bullet points in that job posting. What are the top 2 or 3 things that you think that person does? This is actually a great place to talk to if you have somebody, a mentor to talk to say, I think this person does these 2 or 3 things most of the time. Is my interpretation, do you think my interpretation is correct or what am I missing? It's a wonderful use for a mentor. And then again, the purpose of the application package is to get you another interview, not to get you the job. So that first round interview, the one that usually takes place on Zoom, frankly, it's usually a Zoom interview these days. It used to be a phone interview with the search committee. There's usually about 4 to 8 candidates invited to this round, depending on the pool of candidates and the available resources of the committee. When you're thinking about the committee side of these things, and I hope that you do, this is a lot of time that we're investing into this process. 45-minute, which is really an hour phone interview for 8 candidates. That's 8 hours out of my week that I'm spending interviewing candidates. The search committee really puts a lot into these things, and we honestly really want to see you succeed. We want you to be our person, right? So for you, the first round interview is just the next step in the process. It's an opportunity to assess the fit with the job, the fit with the institution. You can consider it like interview practice. If you're not really sure that this job or this institution is a super great fit for you, rather than going in with a pessimistic view, consider interview practice. And then I'm looking for, on the other side of this first round interview, how do these candidates interact with us as the committee? Sure, if they've gotten this far, they're probably really good in writing. Are they good communicators verbally as well? Can they provide examples that connect to the job via personal experience, knowledge of current events and trends, or explication of a thought process? Do I want to talk further with this person? Do I want to take this person around my library and introduce them to all my colleagues so they can see how awesome that person is, so we can invite them in, right? So when you're looking for examples to talk about in this first round interview, always start with your personal experience, but it's not inappropriate to say, I'm aware that such and such is a trend going on right now, and this is what I've heard about that, and this is what makes me interested in learning more about that, or I'm curious how that works. And it doesn't all have to be out of your personal experience, but start there. So here are some top tips. This first interview, the Zoom interview, It's weird. The phone interview was weird too. They're just weird because they're weird, not because you're doing it wrong. You're going to feel like you're doing it wrong. You're not doing it wrong. It's just weird. Okay. Institutional research is really important. So before you go talking to the search committee on this Zoom interview, you want to find out as much as you can about the institution, about the library, about the jobs that people do, about the initiatives that are going on. You want to read the blog posts. You want to take a look at the events calendar. You want to be in the know about what's going on there. This will help you have questions prepared for the committee. It's really important to have questions prepared for the committee. You can start, I mean, there's all kinds of questions you can use. You can send out a quick Google search and it'll come up lots of these kind of generic questions that you can ask the committee. But the more you know about the institution and what's going on there, the more insightful those questions will be for the committee. And the more you'll show that you are really thinking of yourself in that environment and not just as a person filling a chair, right? Lastly, the purpose of the first round interview is to get to the second interview, not to get the job, okay? Nobody gets the job on the Zoom interview. They get the job after the second interview. So the second interview, what is it? It's an interview on campus, usually. In the height of the pandemic era, we would have probably not invited people to campus, but I think most places are back to a working plan where inviting people to campus is what we're doing again for these second round interviews. It is the final step in the interview process, and it is a very long day. It is a long day for you, and it's also a long day for the search committee, who have to do usually anywhere from 2 to maybe 4 of these really long days in a short period of time to move all the way through this interview process. Usually in the second round interview, there are at least 2 people. Often there are 3. Less commonly, there are 4. It's quite an expensive thing to invite people to campus and to pay for travel and all that kind of stuff. It's an expensive thing monetarily, and it's an expensive thing in terms of the human resources, the people and their time to commit to this. So keep that in mind, that the phone interview helps us to understand if there are people we want to talk to further. So from your end in this second round interview, do you want to do the job, this job, with these people in this place? Do you want to? If you don't want to, that's okay too. Going there and seeing the things and talking to the people will help you determine that. It's an opportunity to ask as many questions as you want. And if you find out fairly early on that this isn't going to be the place for you, that doesn't mean that you can stop asking questions. You've got a whole bunch of librarians in front of you that you can pick their brains about how they do their jobs and what it means here. So it's really an opportunity for you, whether this is where you want to end up or not, to have a captive audience of people who can help you to understand what you know and maybe what you don't know about wherever it is that you end up, or whatever place in libraries you end up. So from my end, I'm wondering, what do others in the library and on campus think about this candidate? I think they're pretty cool. What do you think? Does their presentation show an interesting thought processes, interesting projects, interesting potentials? Typically, as part of this all-day interview, you will give a job talk or a presentation or an open presentation. And this is something where not just the libraries, but the faculty are invited to interact with you, and you give a presentation for them and they can ask questions of you. Usually you're given a prompt for those presentations. It can be something really practical. Like in my area of teaching and learning, it would not be unusual that we might ask people to give a teaching demo, or it could be more theoretical. Like, what do you see as the main challenges in e-resources in the upcoming 5 years or whatever? And believe me, we don't think that you have solved this problem coming straight out of grad school. We aren't looking for you to solve the problem. We're looking for you to show us a little bit about how you think about problems, what you consider, what experience or frameworks or knowledge of current events you lean on when making decisions. We know you don't have the institutional context to like actually have a truly effective solution to that problem. It's okay. We just want to know that how you're thinking about it. So I think for me, the most successful presentations help me to understand how this person will be when I'm sitting in committee with them, or when we have a problem where we have all the information and we need to find a solution. Not that you can just generate off the top of your head the solution to all e-resources problems today, straight out of grad school. It's kind of a ridiculously high bar, right? And so hopefully me putting it that way helps you to feel like you can be more successful in that open presentation context. So here's some tips. Once again, practice makes comfort in the discomfort. You cannot get away from the feeling of nervousness, from feeling awkward or weird or whatever. You can get comfortable with having those feelings. So I will tell you that my background is as a classical musician. I'm a clarinetist. I have a master's in music performance degree. I have stood in front of all kinds of crowds of people, people I know, people I don't know, small crowds, big crowds, whatever. It gives me an edge in my ability to talk to people, to stand up and to present and to interview, but it does not mean that I am comfortable. I am not comfortable. I am simply comfortable with, I am friendly with this feeling of discomfort that I have right now. And that helps me to be successful because I'm not stuck feeling like, oh, I'm a little bit jittery. Oh my gosh, I'm a little bit jittery. What's going to happen if I'm jittery? If I'm jittery, this thing is going to happen. I feel like, yep, my hands are a little fidgety. That seems fair. And we move on, right? It's the second interview is a really long day. And so the more opportunities that you can take to manage your energy, knowing when you are there to be answering questions and knowing when you're there to be absorbing information, those two sort of energetic ends of that spectrum is really helpful. They should always offer you breaks or a little bit of time to yourself. Take them. Even if you're just in the bathroom staring at yourself at the mirror, take them. Nobody is judging you for needing that time. It is a long day where people are talking to you or you are talking to people. This is kind of very practical, but expect to be walking. Expect to be on your feet. Expect that you aren't just walking within the library, but that you may have a campus tour, or you may have to walk a little ways off campus for lunch or whatever it is. Wear comfortable shoes that you can walk in. Expect that you are going to answer the same questions over and over again for different audiences. If you do not have an excellent answer prepared for this, so why are you interested in this job? What brings you to this area? Why would you want to live in Bloomington, Indiana? Everyone's going to ask you that question. And it's not because you didn't answer it the first time. It's because it's a different group of people. And so just expect that everyone's going to want to know the answer to that question and cheerfully answer it and move on. It's part of that like getting to know each other process. I always find, once again, this is me pulling from my performance background, prepare thoroughly and then find a way to have fun and be curious in the moment. There comes a point where you've done all that you can do and either time's run out or your resources have run out or whatever it is. And today is the day. You can either be miserable doing it or you can try and find a way to have fun, be curious, connect with people, ask questions, and learn some really cool stuff. And then lastly, I'm going to give you my secret weapon in a job interview. And this relates to having those questions prepared for the committee or for anyone else. At the end of every meeting with whoever it is, they're going to say, do you have any questions for me? And you're going to say, what are you working on right now that you're excited about? This is an evergreen question you can ask anybody in libraries or outside of libraries. And It's so interesting to hear what people have to say. It really flips that back from the focus being about you to the focus being about them. And people love to talk about themselves, and you learn about some cool stuff that's happening in the libraries, and you learn about what lights people up. And if people have a hard time answering this question, like I'm not excited about anything right now, that's also information that you can use. So that kind of brings me to the end of what I had prepared to say today. But I would really love to answer as many questions as I can before we run out of time today. And just remind you that there's a link here in this line if you want to go purchase the book. Just saying it's worth your money. Your library probably has it too. I think libraries are the highest purchasers of this book.
Wow,
Um,
Megan, what a great session. We've got a lot of questions, so
yeah,
maybe we
awesome.
want to start with the Q&A questions, and then we'll move over to the chat questions.
Okay, I see. What's the job market forecast like for academic librarians? So one other, I don't know off the top of my head. I can tell you right now, and it's not just in academic libraries, but a lot of places, people are having, it's not that there aren't jobs that need doing, it's that getting those jobs approved through the hiring process with the budgets that we have is difficult. So right now, here at IUB, it's taking approximately 2 years as a fast process to fill a job that opens up. And that's because the job has to be written by the hiring manager and approved by the dean and then approved by the vice, and then comes back down again. And then finally we get to post it. And it just takes a really long time. In terms of like how many people are graduating from library schools and open positions, I don't have a good sense of that. I see here a question. I recently saw a reposting of a position I saw months ago. It's been 20+ days since reposting. Just reach out to HR if they're still accepting apps, be okay, or just submit. Just submit. If it comes in, it's not unheard of that even if you submit late. So if you publish in your job posting accepting applications through May 14th or whatever is today, 15th, May 15th, accepting applications through May 15th. We have to give first consideration to those applicants, but if the pool is not large or not strong, we can go back and look at applicants who have submitted their materials afterwards. So whether or not they're still accepting applications, I think why not apply? So how to deal with employers never getting back to you even after a first interview? When do you know it's over? Yeah, so this is a real bugaboo for me. Like, it just seems like common courtesy to say, thank you for your time. We have filled this position, right? When the process has come to an end. But when you look at how long that process can take, right? Remember, 4 to 9 months maybe before it's fully closed. You may be waiting a long time. I wish that I could make more HR departments send courtesy emails to people to say, stop counting on this. We have a signed contract and we're moving on. The reason that you don't find out, like if you've had a phone interview and you don't hear and you don't hear anything else, is because usually the committees are trying to keep their this sounds terrible, trying to keep their options open, right? If you dismiss people that you talked to in the phone interview, the Zoom interview, the first round interview, if you dismiss those people, you can't go back and say, ooh, I think we might need to talk to a couple other people. Let's call in some more, right? I wish that institutions were more proactive about saying they're done. I think I would be curious to know if you're asking HR and they're just not telling you that the process is still ongoing or telling you that they're done. It's kind of, it doesn't look good, to be honest, but unfortunately, that's not something the search committee has any control over usually. Okay, graduating December, I have timing, mandatory qualifications. When a degree is required for the job and I haven't anticipated, oh yeah, you can totally do this. Anticipated award date, but haven't actually received the degree yet. Is it too early to apply? No. I got hired my first job before I graduated. Hoping to apply early, but curious about this point. So what you'll do is on your CV say, degree expected December 2024. Chances are really good at this point that even if you interview for a job right now, you won't be starting, like even if you start the process right now, you won't be starting your job until after December. So yeah, absolutely start applying now. And if you're still finishing up your degree, you can make that clear in your CV just by saying degree expected whenever your degree is expected. Is it normal to get interview questions beforehand for both first and second round interviews? It's becoming more normal. It's not totally normal. Folks will sometimes do this. So the theory in the hiring world is that by providing people the questions that will be asked ahead of time, we are allowing folks who may not, we're no longer privileging people who can talk off the top of their head and on the spot. We're giving people time to prepare, and that makes a more fair interview process because it doesn't it doesn't disadvantage folks who may think more slowly, who may freeze in these kind of high pressure situations and that sort of thing. Is it normal? It happens sometimes. It doesn't always happen. I'm noticing a trend more towards people doing that, but I can't say it's something that you should expect to happen right now. It's not like common practice. Your thoughts on applicants needing published research when applying to academic libraries? I would say if you're looking for a tenure track faculty librarian position, this having something published will be a really big boon in your favor. Now, are we looking for like the top tier journal or something that's like really hard hitting scholarly, like quantitative? No, we're looking to see that you have interest in participating in that process. So if you are looking for that tenure track faculty job, this will really help you. If you aren't looking for that tenure track faculty job, you're looking for a staff job, it doesn't matter one way or the other. It might look a little bit better, but it also may be an indicator that like a staff job, that you are really interested in the research and participating in that research, and that you might be unhappy in a staff job. How do academic libraries in the USA feel about hiring Canadian librarians? I think that has a lot to do with the institution and the institutional resources for hiring, for hiring outside of folks who live here. So at Indiana University, we have a lot of resources for hiring people from Nigeria, from India, because it costs the university, the employer, resources of both money and time and human power to go through all of the rigmarole of various governments and green cards and work visas and the whole situation. Really small institutions don't have the human resources or the financial resources to go through that. Someplace like Indiana University, sure, not a problem. Yeah, so I mentioned that people may struggle answering interview questions about the academic research they're doing. Any tips for answering that? Yeah, I do have tips for answering that. So in my experience with library school students, and we have a small library program here in Indiana, so I do work one-on-one with students who are going onto the job market. This is a really stymieing question. It's like, well, I don't, my independent research, like I really haven't done much of that, or especially if you don't, especially if the library degree is your first master's degree. Often, but not always, folks going into faculty librarian positions have a second master's, if not a PhD. Not always, but frequently if you're going to be on that sort of tenure track. So what you can say is, here are some things I'm interested in. I'm interested in this idea. I'm interested in that idea. I'm interested in something else. But a lot of what I might choose to publish on, I think, is going to be informed by the work that I do here and the people that I meet and the support that I get in starting to do that. Believe me, we understand that you're coming out of school and that you're going to need support in achieving tenure. And a lot of places are really prepared to do that. So I think rather than sort of making up a research agenda off the top of your head to say that you have one, saying like, I'm really interested in some of these questions, but I'm going to be looking for support along the way in determining what direction makes the most sense for me to go in. Thanks for the amazing talk. Tips for transitioning into a librarian role at the institution you already work at, where the hiring committee knows you quite well already. Yeah. So I only say this because this happens. This happens to us here at Indiana University. Because we have a library program, and we don't always hire folks out of our library degree, but a lot of folks who are here have degrees from UB. Not me, but others. And there is that moment where you're like, oh, I was your supervisor and now we're equals, right? Or we were equals and now I'm your supervisor. And I think that that's always just a little bit of like a testing out period where you're trying to figure out where you fit into the hierarchy. And honestly, that's gonna happen when you start a new job, regardless of whether you start a new job at your institution or at a different institution. So if you are already in a librarian position and you're moving up to a manager position, there's going to be a period of time where you're like, oh, I'm not really sure what I'm doing here. I'm going to spend a lot of time listening. I'm going to be talking to people. We're going to figure out how this goes. And so I think that maybe my best advice is like, just to expect it to be a little bit weird for a while. Not weird because of you, not weird because anyone's doing it wrong, just weird because things changed. And now you got to figure out how to work together a little bit differently. Someone who's graduating with her MLIS next month, lots of experience working, but none in the LIS field. How important is volunteer work to show community care when applying for a librarian job? Yeah, so I think that it is really important to show that you have to spend some time in libraries. Lots of work experience is great. I'm certain there are a lot of things that you've done that translate really directly to librarian work. But one of the things that working in libraries, one of the big challenges to people working in libraries is understanding the difference between what they think the work in libraries is and what the work in libraries actually looks like. And volunteering, even for a short period of time, will really help you to sort of myth bust some of those things that you might not be realizing that you're holding on to as like a belief of what you think the work is versus what the work actually is. So I think even spending, like I said, even a short period of time, if you can volunteer on a project, if you can spend Saturdays, half a day, and I don't know, there's lots of opportunities to spend a little bit of time behind the scenes in a library. Will give you so much information about what the day-to-day is actually like, that will really make it clear to folks on the other end of that committee that you understand what libraries do and that you want to be doing that work.
Meggan, we have one question. I think you might have passed over. What do you do when there's a question or an interaction that takes you off guard when you're the interviewee?
Yeah. So do you have an example of what, like, can you give me an example of one that might do that? If you're taken off guard. So like you didn't expect them to ask about that, or what they're asking might be like borderline inappropriate for hiring.
Or maybe it could be the case where you don't really have an answer. Is it okay not to have an answer?
Oh yeah, totally. I think it's more, I think it shows more authenticity and willingness to work with people to say, you know, I really don't have much experience there. This is what I can tell you, what I know about the thing, but I don't have anything to draw on for that. And I'm aware that that's a gap in my knowledge, is a far more powerful place to come from than making stuff up that I guarantee you the committee can see through, right? We can see through it when you're just sort of trying to make something like a research agenda or whatever it is up out of nowhere. It's better to say, yeah, I don't know. I have heard this and this and this, but that's a gap in my knowledge. Is that what you were looking for, James?
I don't know what the person, I think the person
Okay.
said, how about if you've been fired? Probably even gaps in employment.
Oh,
And Megan, this will probably have to be the last
yeah.
question, so we can close out.
So fired, gaps in employment. That's interesting. So it's not unusual for, I think it depends a little bit on what the circumstances were and the circumstances that you're in. So it's not unusual for academics to have some gaps in their employment, especially if you're working with a partner who's also an academic. There can be points in time where you have moved institutions and your partner has a job, but you don't. Or there may be instances where it's a pandemic and you can't actually work your job and take care of your children and their online learning needs all at the same time, and you needed to leave your job. And I think that those are circumstances that are really understandable and easily explainable to folks. Like, you don't need to feel as though that would privilege you against something. If you're talking about years long gaps, you probably want to address that briefly in your cover letter, right? Like, I was on medical disability or whatever it was. And and you may not want to say that either. I think the longer the gap, the more you might want to just briefly say something in your cover letter, like in the closing paragraph about re-entering the job force. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be thrown out of the pool, though. That's not like a disqualifier. As far as getting fired, I'm not sure. The only way that they would know that is if someone told them that. You told them that, or someone at your previous institution told them that. So I wouldn't necessarily go in thinking that like everyone knows I got fired unless you have cause, like actual documented cause to believe that. And then we'd probably need to have another talk, I think, about what the best way to approach that.
But the great thing is, nobody's going to get fired. We're all going to get hired. And I
Oh
want to
yeah.
really thank Megan for doing this. This has been very informative. And I'd like to encourage the participants that are still here. If you are a student, membership to NASIG is free. You can network with people that work at different universities across this country, across Canada. That's the whole idea, is just like Megan said, it's about networking, working together to help new professionals get these wonderful opportunities. Thank you again, Megan. Just from the bottom of our hearts, we thank you.
My emails are on the screen. If I didn't get to your question and you really, really want to know, you go right ahead and send me an email.
Thanks again, everybody. Have a great day. Amy, are we going to stop the recording now?